My next guest is Paul Hofheinz. He's the president of the Lisbon Council think tank here in Brussels. Thank you so much for speaking to Bloomberg. It does seem that, yes, they say we're there, we're ready to act, but without details, the markets isn't going to believe them, are they?
Well, I think one of the most striking things about this crisis has been the enormous ad hoc nature, both of the crisis as it develops, but particularly of the response. I mean, the euro is a very young currency, very untested rules for how it should be governed, and frankly, a lot of areas not fully thought through. So they're having to do a whole lot of thinking at essentially 5 minutes to midnight. I think in terms of what they decided last night, it's entirely appropriate that there not be too many details on this yet. The Greeks have not asked for a bailout package, and that kind of detail can all be filled in later. What they did want to do was send the political message that we're on the case, we have a technical solution, and we know how to move quickly when the moment comes. There may also, by the way, have been more detail discussed behind closed doors. I think you'd have to be a forensic expert in order to figure out what that was, because for now, all we know is what they're telling us.
Paul, it's all very well and good to have a political will, but are they going to act if Greece needs it?
Well, I think that's what they've said, is that they will. I think the larger question is Greece going to be able to deliver on its end of the bargain? And it's, by the way, a shame that the crisis has been turned into one of an argument among European Union, Eurozone finance ministers. The bigger issue here is, can the Greek package hold? Can they deliver? Because the signs have all been that they will not get the aid package unless they stick to this, and it's going to be, frankly, very difficult for them.
And one of the heated arguments is, of course, the role of credit default swaps, of derivatives, of hedge funds, and what role they play in exacerbating this financial crisis. Do we need to regulate them? Well,
absolutely. I mean, sure, there is clearly an argument going on about that right now, too, which we're going to see this morning. I think, do we need to regulate them? Absolutely. We might have a discussion how far and how and what we need to do, but that there needs to be certainly at a minimum, a better collaboration and working together among jurisdictions, and probably at a maximum some kind of standards to protect consumers, to protect against systemic risk. Yes, we're going to need something like that. Now, let's make sure we don't essentially hobble the industry in the process of doing that, and that's what the argument is about today.
Now, we also had the U.S. counterpart to the Internal Markets Commissioner, Mr. Gensler, here yesterday.
Yes.
Is the U.S. going to coordinate any regulation on hedge funds with Europe?
Right. Well, all this discussion, of course, takes place in the wake of the rather extraordinary investigation of Lehman Brothers, which gave us all sorts of detail last week on exactly what can happen when you have regulatory arbitrage going on a global scale with global capital markets. So I think, yes, at some point we do need to talk very seriously, probably through the G20, about a common approach on these matters. But that said, I wouldn't advise anyone to wait for that. It's going to be a while before we get there, and maybe others need to move first on that.
Paul, there does say, I mean, there will be a probe on this, but can we actually expect some kind of legislation banning a lot of the derivatives, and what kind of impact will it have on the financial markets?
I don't think you'll see anything banning derivatives. Maybe, who knows? We've all been surprised in the past. I don't think that's what we're talking about here. I do think we're talking about greater transparency, about a need to disclose more, to make the transactions more open, and in particular to make sure that consumers, ultimately, the ultimate consumer of these products, understand what they're purchasing and understand what the risks are involved. We have a mountain of evidence that quite a few people, including so-called very, very smart investors, really didn't know exactly what they were getting into the last time around.